Hello everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Watch my video and subscribe my channel. I got you, Luna! After learning the truth, Will grabbed Luna's hair and took her to the police station. Will Spencer's voice thundered through the empty corridor of the Forrester mansion as the echo of his furious footsteps matched the storm raging in his chest. I got you, Luna, he seethed, the words dripping like venom as Luna Nozawa, wide-eyed and trembling, tried to retreat, but was met with the cold grip of his hand tangling into her dark hair, yanking her forward with a force that betrayed the betrayal festering in his soul. This was no longer the playful, mischievous Luna who once pretended innocence in front of him. This was a deceiver exposed, a manipulator caught in her own intricate web of lies that had cost him his love with Electra Forrester, his reputation among the Spencers, and his own fragile sense of trust. And as he dragged her down the long hall lined with portraits of Forrester and Spencer legacies, his mind replayed every whispered warning, every raised eyebrow, every moment he had dismissed as paranoia because he wanted to believe in her. He wanted to believe that the night at his promotion party, where she disguised herself as Electra and shattered the foundation of his future, was just a drunken misunderstanding. But the evidence had mounted like bricks in a prison wall. The altered texts, the perfume that wasn't Electra's, the surveillance footage of her slipping out of his suite at dawn, the trembling confession of a caterer who had seen her switch gowns, and finally the DNA result of the unborn child she claimed to carry, a child she insisted was conceived in love, but was in fact the product of her deception. And now, with the Los Angeles police already tipped off and waiting, Will's grip only tightened as Luna whimpered, her voice cracking with desperate pleas of innocence that no longer pierced his armor of fury. Will, please, it's not what you think. I did it because I loved you. I never meant to hurt you. But those words, once honey to his ego, now stung like acid against the wound she carved into his life. You loved me. You have devastated me, he barked, dragging her through the garden where memories of moonlit kisses now seemed like ghosts mocking his pain. And in that moment the weight of the Spencer name pressed upon his shoulders. Bill Spencer's son, raised to be strong, raised to hunt down betrayal, raised to never let a wrong go unpunished. And though his heart ached with the fractured remnants of the boy who once thought Luna could be his redemption after Steffi's rejection, after Hope's cold shoulder, after the endless comparisons to Liam, now he was something else, something sharper, colder, almost like his father in his younger, ruthless days. And as the police car headlights cut through the driveway mist, Luna finally fell to her knees, grabbing at his wrist, tears streaking her cheeks like rainfall on shattered glass. Please, Will, don't do this. I'm carrying your child, she sobbed, and for a fraction of a heartbeat his resolve wavered, the ghost of what might have been flickering in his eyes, nights of lullabies, mornings of coffee and forgiveness. But then the image of Electra's broken face the night she found out, the screaming match with his father, the mockery in the tabloids, the whispered speculation that he was just another Spencer boy who couldn't keep his life together. All of it surged back, hardening his jaw. That child will never grow up thinking lies are love, he said with finality, handing her to the officers as flashbulbs erupted from hidden paparazzi. And Luna's cries were drowned by the roar of the engine pulling away, leaving Will standing in the driveway under the cold Los Angeles moon, hair disheveled, heart shattered, mind racing with what would come next. The court battles, the media circus, the inevitable arrival of Lee Finnegan breathing fire to protect her niece, puppy screams echoing from the hospital corridors claiming it was all a misunderstanding. Steffi Forrester watching from her balcony with conflicted eyes as she remembered the night Luna tried to attack her. Sheila Carter oddly silent for once, perhaps seeing a reflection of her own past sins in the young woman being hauled off, and somewhere in the chaos Hope Logan would wonder if this was her chance to step back into Will's life, now that Electra's trust was gone and Luna's mask had fallen, and in the deepest recesses of his mind, Will wondered if this was truly justice or just the beginning of another twisted chapter where truth and obsession danced on the blade. Of destiny, because in Los Angeles, nothing ever ended with a police car ride. There would be secrets unearthed, pregnancies questioned, paternity tests challenged. Alliances shifted like sand, and somewhere down the line, maybe Luna would return not as the girl who lied, but as the woman who rose from the ashes of her own schemes. Or maybe she would return with vengeance, darker, crueler, claiming that he stole her freedom when he himself once stole her heart. And as the night deepened, Will whispered to no one, "I got you, Luna, but at what cost?" Unaware that far across town, a shadowy figure slipped a file into an envelope marked confidential, inside a second DNA test, one that could flip this entire case on its head and prove that Luna's child might not be his at all, but someone far more dangerous. Someone tied to the Forrester empire, and with that the story only began to coil tighter, ready to strike again in the city where love is currency, betrayal is sport, and forgiveness is just the prelude to the next. The air in the sterile, dimly lit interrogation room was heavy with the scent of coffee gone cold and the faint metallic tang of handcuffs that bit into Luna's wrists as she sat hunched forward, strands of her dark hair still tangled from Will's grip, her mind racing like a storm-tossed ocean as the detectives circled her with clipped voices and skeptical gazes, laying out photos, text messages, receipts of nights that blurred into a haze of champagne and deception, each piece of evidence, hammering the coffin of her defense shut. But Luna, eyes glistening with tears she refused to let fall, knew that every word she uttered could become a weapon against her or a thread that unraveled a far larger web. Because this wasn't just about that night with Will. It was about the whispers she had heard behind hospital curtains when Lee spoke to someone over the phone about containment. It was about the envelope Poppy had burned before anyone could see it. It was about the strange messages from an unknown number signed only with the initial R, telling her to stay quiet, to play her role, to seduce, to sabotage. And now, as Will paced outside the room, his hands trembling, his father Bill leaning against the wall with arms folded, jaw tight with a predator's patience, the young Spencer heir felt the first fissure of doubt crack through his anger, because he could still hear Luna's words ringing in his ears. "You think this ends with me behind bars? You have no idea what you've started." And Bill, ever the strategist, whispered low enough so only his son could hear, "Don't get soft now, Will. She made a fool out of you, out of our family. This is about more than your heart. This is about Spencer legacy, about control." But deep down, Will wasn't so sure anymore, because memories of Luna's trembling hands the morning after, the way she avoided Electra's gaze, the way she begged for a second chance without ever explaining why, came rushing back, and something in her desperation had always felt orchestrated, as though she too were a pawn in a much bigger game. And across the city, Electra Forrester sat before a vanity mirror, her phone buzzing with calls from tabloids and friends. But her reflection was pale, haunted, her hands clutching the small silver necklace Will had once given her, because no matter how righteous her anger, a part of her still loved him and the thought of him in this whirlwind. Angry, betrayed, breaking apart. Piece by piece, made her heart ache, and somewhere in the darkness of a private clinic, Lee Finnegan stared at a computer screen, her fingers poised over a delete key as surveillance footage of a hospital corridor flickered before her eyes, showing a figure that looked like Luna and another, blurred but familiar, Rana Nozawa, the twin no one was supposed to know existed, the one Lee had hidden overseas after the car crash, the one whose medical records had been erased, the one who might be the real culprit. And Lee's breath quickened, because if that footage ever surfaced, if it ever reached Bill Spencer's hands, her carefully built facade of control would collapse, and Sheila Carter, watching from a darkened booth in Il Giardino, scrolled through her phone and smiled, a rare, cold smile, because chaos meant opportunity, and if Will thought he had Luna where he wanted her, he was about to learn that the truth in Los Angeles had more faces than the city had lights. And as the clock ticked past midnight, as Poppy stumbled into the station demanding to see her daughter, her voice breaking, accusing Will of cruelty and vengeance, as Steffi and Finn debated in the Cliff House whether to intervene or let the Spencers destroy themselves, as Hope Logan read the news and whispered Liam's name with a flicker of old memories, the storm thickened, threads tangled, and somewhere deep in the holding cell, Luna whispered a promise to herself. her nails digging into her palms until they bled. I will not go down for what she did, and if I burn, I'm taking them all with me. The fluorescent lights of the holding cell flickered weakly, casting pale shadows that danced across the cracked tile as Luna sat on the cold bench, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. The weight of the cuffs now gone, but the ache of Will's grip lingering like a phantom bruise on her scalp, her mind spinning in a vicious loop of disbelief, fury, and a gnawing terror she could no longer suppress, because somewhere beyond those concrete walls, decisions were being made about her life. Decisions she could neither see nor control. And as the distant hum of the police station quieted into the early hours, a uniformed officer approached with a set of keys and a clipboard, his voice low, eyes avoiding hers as he murmured, "Transfer order came through. Spencer family requested it." And in that moment Luna's stomach dropped, because she knew this wasn't standard procedure. This was Bill Spencer pulling strings. This was a powerful man deciding that public justice wasn't enough, that she had to be moved somewhere less visible, more malleable. And as they led her down the dim corridor, she caught a glimpse of Will through a glass partition, his hands in his hair, his shoulders heavy with something that wasn't quite triumph anymore, something closer to guilt gnawing at the edges of his rage, because in the hours since her arrest, fragments had started to surface. Text messages from a blocked number, discrepancies in security footage from the night in question, whispers from a PI that Bill had hired who claimed he had seen Luna and another woman, nearly identical, arguing in the shadows of the Forrester rooftop weeks before the scandal broke. And those fragments planted seeds of doubt, seeds that now made Will pace the corridor like a man haunted, while across the city Poppy Nozawa collapsed in her kitchen, her hand shaking as she tried to dial Lee, her voice breaking in a voicemail that would go unanswered, begging her sister to reveal what she knew about the missing birth records, about the second child no one spoke of, about the night years ago in Tokyo when Rana was declared dead and yet someone, somewhere, had whispered to Poppy at a funeral that no body was ever found. And in the Forrester guest house, Electra Forrester scrolled endlessly through social media, her anger cooling into something far more dangerous. Resolve, because she was beginning to suspect that Luna's fall was too easy, too orchestrated. That Will's sudden burst of vengeance was not born from clarity, but manipulation. And the name that haunted her sleepless mind was not Luna's but Bill's, because if anyone could turn love into a weapon, it was Bill Spencer, and in a gated estate on the outskirts of town. Sheila Carter sat with a glass of red wine, her phone buzzing with a single encrypted message. Phase 1 complete. R-to-L transition underway, and her lips curved into a predatory smirk as Finn entered, his eyes darting between the screen and her expression, his gut twisting with a dread he couldn't quite name, because Steffi was already fuming that the Spencers were dragging their family name through the mud again, and Finn, caught between his medical oath, his loyalty to his wife, and the quiet, inexplicable sympathy he felt for the girl now locked away, knew that this was only the opening act of something that would make the old Forrester-Logan wars look like child's play. And as the black, van-carrying Luna rolled into the night, her reflection in the window blurred with the neon of the city, she whispered a name she hadn't spoken aloud in years, Rana, and her voice trembled not with fear, but with fury, because if her twin had returned, if this entire spiral was the work of a ghost long thought buried, then the war Will thought he had won had only just begun. And somewhere in the darkness, Bill's phone lit up with a call from an unknown number, a voice cold and familiar saying she's in position. "Do you still want to silence her?" And Bill, eyes narrowing, fingers drumming against the leather of his car seat, answered with a single word that would set the next chain of betrayals into motion. Not yet. The van shuddered as it turned off the main freeway, the city lights fading behind them, replaced by the skeletal outlines of warehouses and half-finished developments on the edge of Los Angeles. And Luna, her wrists now free, but her dignity shackled by the weight of betrayal, leaned her forehead against the cold glass, trying to piece together every move that had brought her here, every whispered promise, every shadow that had danced behind her back, because this transfer was no accident, she could feel it in the way the officers avoided her gaze, in the way the driver kept checking his rearview mirror, in the way the GPS on the dashboard was turned off, and somewhere in that silence, the name Rana throbbed like a wound, because if her twin was alive, if Rana was the one who had drugged Will, impersonated Electra, and left Luna to bear the shame, then this wasn't justice, this was a burial, a carefully orchestrated burial of the wrong sister. And in the high-rise Spencer Tower, Will sat with his head in his hands, the weight of his actions settling like lead in his stomach, because the more he replayed the night, the less certain he became. Luna's perfume, her voice, yes, but the video footage from the club showed a different angle, one where her eyes seemed sharper, colder, like someone wearing her face, and the PI his father had hired had been strangely evasive about timestamps, and Bill, looming behind him, placed a heavy hand on his shoulder and said, "Son, this is what it takes to protect our name. Don't let guilt rewrite the truth." But Will couldn't shake the echo of Luna's final words before she was taken. "If I burn, I'm taking them all with me." And in a dimly lit office at University Hospital, Lee Finnegan stared at a sealed envelope marked with the initials RN, her hands trembling because inside were adoption papers she had signed years ago. Papers that proved Rana Nozawa had never been buried, only hidden, only sent away after the clinic. Fire, after the DNA test that would have exposed everything. And now the truth was clawing its way back, threatening to ruin not only Luna, but the entire Forrester-Finnegan alliance. Because if it came out that Lee had manipulated medical records, that she had lied to Finn, to Steffi, to the world, it would destroy the fragile truce she had built. And across town, Poppy pounded on a locked door at the LAP, screaming to know where her daughter had been taken, her tears streaking mascara down her cheeks as Hope Logan arrived, clutching her coat, torn between old love for Liam's family and her growing unease at how far the Spencers were willing to go. And somewhere between the steel ribs of that moving Van Luna closed her eyes and saw her twin's face, the face she had buried in memory, the face she had been told was gone. And she whispered, "Rana, why?" And the man in the passenger seat, the one who hadn't said a word since they left the station, turned slightly, his eyes catching hers in the dark, and in a voice that made her blood run cold, he said, "Because she was never meant to disappear, only you were." And with that the van turned sharply into a gated compound, cameras flashing, gates locking behind them, and in the shadows of the rooftop, Sheila Carter watched from a distance, her phone pressed to her ear as she murmured, "It's starting, Finn, and you're not ready for what's coming." Because the web had been spun, the players were moving, and the line between vengeance and truth had just been erased. The metal door slammed shut behind her with a reverberating echo that made Luna's heart pound against her ribs like a war drum, her breath catching as her eyes adjusted to the dim warehouse light. And then she saw her, the reflection of her own face, but sharper, crueler, eyes gleaming with something that was not remorse but triumph. Rana, alive, standing in the shadows like a ghost made flesh, her lips curling into a smirk that sent a cold shiver down Luna's spine. "Took them long enough to catch you," Rana whispered, stepping into the light, her hair tied back, her clothes designer but deliberately understated, the kind of camouflage only wealth could buy. "You really thought you were the chosen one, didn't you? That Lee would protect you forever. That Poppy would keep her mouth shut. That would stay blind." And Luna stumbled back, shaking her head, her voice cracking. You were dead. Rana, I saw the ashes, but Rana cut her off with a laugh, sharp as glass. "Ashes they showed you, not mine, little sister." Just another lie and a life built on them. And somewhere miles away Will Spencer stared at his phone. The GPS pinged from the van, lost in a dead zone. His father in the next room making quiet calls in the language of power and leverage. And Will's got twisted because he had demanded justice, but this silence, this disappearance, felt like something else entirely. And across Los Angeles, Poppy collapsed in the lobby of the police precinct, her cries echoing as Hope rushed to catch her. Steffi arriving moments later with Finn, their faces pale with a dread they could no longer disguise. And Finn's phone buzzed with a message he wasn't supposed to see, a still frame from a security camera. Luna being led into a gated compound owned by a shell company tied to Spencer Publications. And in that moment Finn knew this wasn't law. This was war, and war always left bodies, and back in the warehouse Luna lunged forward, her hands trembling. "You did this, you wore my face, you destroyed my life. Why, Rana? What have they promised you?" And Rana's smile faded into something darker, almost sad. "They didn't promise me anything, they owed me, because I was the one they threw away when they decided one daughter was easier to control than two, when she sent me off with a forged death certificate, so she could mold you into her perfect little pawn. But I came back, and I made sure you would pay for every year I spent erased." And Luna felt the weight of the cuffs again, though her wrists were bare. The weight. And Sheila smiled wider. "Saving my future, darling, because if Bill Spencer thinks he can bury this girl and walk away clean, he has forgotten how many ghosts I've buried for less." And the room thickened with the weight of secrets as the door above locked with a final metallic click, sealing Luna's fate. Or perhaps, finally, opening the only door that could lead her out.